start with the Socratic review method. It's a little messy right now. Oh, okay, Caroline. I'm only working on logic games right now, so nothing to do with logical reasoning. All right, okay. Okay, logic games is tough, but it gets better. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the Socratic review method tonight. So I think Kim has already shared the link in the chat, but basically, I get a lot of questions asking me, what's one thing that helped you out the most during your prep? How did you increase your score? And I would say if I had to give one single tip in terms of how to improve logical reasoning, that would be the Socratic review method. This is something that I picked up that was very specific to Steve's course, the LSAT Unplugged course, and it really just brought me over that plateau. So when you're working on logical reasoning, the first stage that you go through is kind of getting used to the question types. Question types like sufficient assumption, necessary assumption, must be true. These aren't really questions that we see on a daily basis outside of the LSAT. And you have to get familiar with exactly what it's asking you for. You have to get familiar with the tasks at hand. And once you get a grasp of the theory, your score jumps a little, right? Because you're finally understanding what the test is asking you for. And then the next stage is, familiarizing yourself. You're drilling by question type, perhaps. This might be the prep that some of you guys are doing right now. And you get familiar with it. You know what to do. When you see a sufficient assumption question, your mind goes, okay, step one, I do this. Step two, I do this. And this was also what I did. And then at that point, I pretty much plateaued around, I would say like a low 160 score to mid 160s. And I wasn't really able to reach that -3 on a logic reasoning section. So when I say -3, that means getting 3 questions wrong on, out of 25 questions. That was really hard. And, no matter how much drilling I did by question type, that just didn't work. So you have to really dig deep into why you're getting these questions wrong. And this is something that Steve shared with me, that at that stage, it's not really about the question type that you're struggling with. It's more about the way you're reading the answers, the way you're reading the stimulus, and your understanding. It's not about the question type that you're struggling with anymore. So I started doing the Socratic review method, and I've shared with you tonight a kind of a spreadsheet that I've created. So it says LSAT Unplugged Socratic Review Worksheet. And I really, really implore all of you guys to work through this during your review process. So you see here, first, make a list of the question number, question type that you've done, the conclusion, if there was one, the premise. And then if you got the question wrong or if it confused you, ask yourself, why did the question confuse you? Was it the passage, the stimulus that confused you? Was it the answer choices that confused you? So for example, if you said, the answer choice confused me, why did it confuse you? So you really have to dig deep into these sort of questions. And then you go the next step down. If the answer choice confused you, then why did you choose the incorrect answer choice? So what element in there attracted you to it? And why is this incorrect? And then you analyze the correct answer choice. So what made it seem unappealing to you? And why was this choice correct as opposed to the original incorrect answer choice that you were attracted to? And after all of this, write yourself a short takeaway, a summary of how do you avoid the same mistake in the future. So what will I be more aware of next time? So I've also shared with you this very candid example of just what I used to do during my prep. So this was for PT 86. I'm in the Word document that says Socratic review method, candid example, PT 86 analysis. And you'll see that this is very candid because some of it doesn't really make sense because I was just typing to myself at the time. But you see how I'll write down the question type, kind of summarize the stimulus, conclusion, the premise, what I got wrong, so the incorrect answer choice, and then I write myself a little analysis of just my thought process. So I'm going to go down to this example, point of agreement. So you see here, I've written down the stimulus, what the stimulus has said, and then the incorrect answer choice. And then, I said, well, this is true for X, it's not completely supported by M. And then she said this, I cannot assume this, and blah, blah, blah. It was just my thinking of how did I get to this incorrect answer choice, and why can't I do this? Why is this incorrect? And then I go on to say, okay, what was the correct answer? And then, ultimately I arrive at a takeaway. So for point of agreement, I said, if an answer choice is verbatim or a paraphrase of only what one person says, it's likely to be incorrect. And then I told myself with point of agreement questions, keep in mind what both speakers' conclusions are. Be careful with quantity words, few, many, some. These could make the answer choice incorrect. Just takeaways like this. And eventually, as you go on and do more practice tests and more in-depth review, you'll start finding that you have particular thought patterns, or you'll arrive at particular assumptions regularly. And by doing this, you're able to catch them and change the way in which you think about different questions. So I just wanted to share this because this was really, really helpful in my LR prep process. And I really do hope you guys give it a go. It is time consuming. It's not the best thing, the most interesting thing to do, but it definitely helps. All right, I have a question here by Hyunjung. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry if I'm not. Do you memorize the pattern of a right answer choice when you do the review method? Okay, so what do you mean by the pattern of a right answer choice? When you get the wrong answer. There is a pattern that were thought wrongfully. I'm sorry, I'm still not really understanding what you mean by memorizing the pattern. Feel free to unmute yourself as well if you want to do that.
Sure, I'll just talk. I'm sorry, just trying to type as much of it.
It's okay.
So I wanted to question whether you, so let's say you got something wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do the review method and you see that there's the reason, you kind of find the reason why you got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why the correct answer is correct. The correct answer is correct. And there's some sort of pattern, as in mean of like step by step, and there's some reason why this correct answer choice is the correct answer. And so I call this as a pattern just in case, just trying to make it simpler, because it seems to me that there's always like a right logical pattern on whatever how do I say it, the question types they have. For example, resolve the paradox. There's a rifle method on approaching this question type to get to the right choice. And so I thought that, like if there's a slightly wrong step on getting the right answer, then by reviewing the method, you see that there's I'm sorry, I'm just kind of like...
No, I get what you're saying now. I completely understand. You're talking about, if I'm understanding correctly, you're talking about pattern recognition when it comes to like question types, whether or not by doing, all of these questions and by doing deep review, am I finding a particular type of question type which correlates with a particular type of answer choice? Are you talking about that, whether or not I found a pattern?
Yeah. So do you memorize those things so that, next time you don't get lost or you don't get it wrong?
Okay. I have to say, unfortunately, after, I did prep for like months, right? And I did like very deep review. And I have to say, maybe it's just me, but it's going to be a disappointing answer that I didn't find any sort of very strong pattern that one can just stick to in terms by question type. I'll explain this. So as I was going through the Socratic review method, like towards like, I would say midway when I like really got into it, I started to see certain patterns, as you were saying. Um, but so I would write a takeaway, right? I would write a takeaway like on, I don't know, main point questions. The correct answer are likely to be this. And I would write that to myself. And then the next time I would do it, I would find that sometimes that would lead me to the wrong answer because LSAT test writers are very smart. They sometimes will write answer choices that sound like they're right. And if you're just, I guess, trying to take a shortcut by using pattern recognition, sometimes you're gonna be led to the wrong answer choice because if you're super confident in just like this one pattern, as soon as you see that, you're gonna pick that answer, right? And you're not gonna read any of the other answer choices. So that's definitely taking a shortcut, and I've been led astray by that method at times. So towards the end, some of my takeaways definitely became more qualified, where I'll be like, okay, sometimes it'll be like this, but still read all the other answer choices and confirm that that is the right answer. So I hope that helps.
So basically, you're saying not to memorize, but instead trying to understand as much as you can.
I would say don't try to find a shortcut and try to see if there is a pattern for the right answers. And don't just rely on, okay, so like this is I think this is the pattern. And then as soon as I see I specific identifier, that's immediately the right answer. I would say don't do that, but instead, I would say the Socratic review method is less about pattern recognition, but more about learning about the specific false assumptions that you have in your thought process. At times, I will find myself in my analysis saying, okay, because this certain word was in the stimulus or because this certain word was a match in the answer choice, it led me to think that this was the correct answer and this assumption sprung up, and that's why I was led astray. So I would say that this particular exercise of the Socratic review method, it's more about exposing the faulty thought processes that you have in terms of approaching the LSAT and less about pattern recognition. But it's pattern recognition for yourself because you'll start recognizing patterns of how you have been thinking falsely in terms of approaching the questions. So I hope that helps. Caroline, you want me to share all the documents? I will compile a list of the links after this class, and I'll maybe send it to Steve, and then he can send you like a whole document of it. But it'll be very boring, and a lot of it won't make sense, but you can go through my thought process. I'm gonna go up a little. Jocelyn, you have a question. Go for it.
Yeah, this is Jocelyn here. So I wanted to kind of connect what you were saying to our colleague who asked a question rather to what you said Steve stated as far as the review method uncovering how you're thinking about a particular question or how you're making assumptions that you shouldn't be making as you approach the LSAT. Can you unpack that a little bit? I personally find that like as I'm trying to like review like for example inference questions, for example, it can be difficult to when I'm trying to review my own work to kind of unpack and figure out where I missed it. Because I feel like what I like my perspective or my view is kind of still overshadowing how I should be reviewing, and then I'm not really reviewing, if that makes sense.
Okay, I see. Um, Are you using this? So I would say there's a very specific way to like make sure you really get down into like the trenches of your thoughts. So I think the first step would be asking yourself, what confused you, right? Like, was it the question type? Like, were you confused by the question type, and were you confused by what to do there? That's like the first thing, right? And then if you go back to the stimulus and you take a look at the stimulus, were you confused by what the conclusion was? Were you confused by what the premise was? Were you confused by the method of reasoning? And then you think about, okay, so why is this like answer choice incorrect? Why did I think that this was correct? I don't know if that helps. I don't think I've ever found an instance where I really, really couldn't figure out why my thought process led me there. Although, no, there may have, but I did have a study buddy, which I would recommend to everyone here. But I guess I would probably reach out to my study buddy and just kind of say, like, I'm really having issues with this question, and have them kind of unpack it a little bit. But I think in general, this method is definitely helpful. Marcos, you have a question. And I see you have your hand raised as well.
Yes, I actually had a question. So, you said that I think you said you scored you were scoring like a -3, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So you also took the flex, correct?
Yes.
And here's, sorry if I get, it's not personal, but what was your hard, I guess, like for you, what was kind of difficult, as far as an LR? Like, what was difficult for you?
Yeah, this is not personal at all. I'm happy to share. So for LR, let's see, what was difficult for me? I think what was difficult at the beginning was different to what was difficult towards the end. So at the beginning of my process, it was very difficult for me to get the inference questions right, because that's like hard logic, right? You have to understand conditional reasoning, you have to understand how to make inferences in terms of like must be true, sufficient assumption, necessary assumption were certainly very difficult for me, because there's a lot of, again, conditional reasoning. You have to do like a very specific task, and getting used to that was not easy. But as I learned the method, and got used to it, I drilled it. I realized that for those sort of hard logic questions, they're almost like a logic game question where there's only one correct answer choice. It's almost like an equation. You're able to like derive the correct answer after you do the work. And then but in contrast to that, in the beginning, like strengthen, weaken, we all know how to strengthen and weaken arguments. So at the beginning, those were the easiest. But towards the end, I realized that a lot of the answer choices for example, strengthen and weaken questions are, or most strongly supported, they are somewhat qualified. So you'll see question stems where it says, which one of these most strengthens the argument, for example. So those became the most difficult, because I definitely did see some answer choices where it strengthened somewhat the argument, but maybe it wasn't the most. And I would find myself kind of flip-flopping between the two answers. So yeah, it's different for me in terms of like stages of prep.
Yeah, and my other question is, when you took the flex, were you, because this is where I'm kind of paranoid, and I did bring it up to Steve, and he and I knew that he couldn't really answer it, but what I'm afraid of is, so like you said about inference questions, I was having issues with that too. For some reason, I was just getting like, if I would do 10 of them, I was getting like all 10 wrong. So I just started just drilling inference questions like must be true and most strongly supported. And now, like, I mean, I'll average out of 10, maybe like 6 or maybe 5, on a bad day, maybe 4, but that's because I really wasn't reading it or following Steve's way of like you said, like it's like a game, and that's what I have seen. Like I actually do have to write it out. In other words, when I do that. But my question is, on when you took the LSAT Flex, was there a question that you kind of did not see, like maybe you didn't see a necessary assumption, or that you were anticipating, and I guess you saw most of? Because I know every test changes, but what I'm afraid of is if I walk into a test and I spent so much time on like sufficient assumptions and inferences, and I don't even see one, which I don't know if that could be possible, because when I take a test, I do all four sections, and I've seen there's times where like I'll do, like one section, and I'll just see one sufficient assumption question, or I won't even see one in one section, but then I'll see it in the other section. Um, so did you kind of see that also when you took the flex, or your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, the flex, the way they've been doing it, I mean, I only took one flex, so I can't say I have like a large enough sample size, but at least from what I know of the test, the flex, it's very similar to all previous test and administrations before the flex. So it's not like they have new question types or anything, or it's not like they all of a sudden added like 10 strengthened questions and made the section completely unbalanced. I will say that so when I took the flex, I did a lot of like sleuthing online to see which PTs they were pulling from. And they were pulling a lot of their practice tests for the flex, at least last year, from PT 60s and 70s. This isn't official information, so like don't quote me, but this is what everyone was saying. So, those are tests just like a few years back. So it's not like completely new test sections. It has not become unbalanced. And in terms of your question about making inferences and being worried that you're spending a lot of time on, like sufficient assumption questions, I would say if you're practicing the hard skill of, for example, conditional reasoning, contrapositives, making inferences out of those sort of equations, like you said, those are skills that will carry through in no matter what sort of, not even just in the LR section, but those will be useful to you in also the logic games section as well. And those skills, they show up in sufficient assumption questions. They show up in sometimes necessary assumption. They show up in method of reasoning. They show up even in parallel reasoning like we're doing today. They show up in must be true. So those are hard skills that are transferable throughout the test. So I don't think you'd be wasting time practicing and drilling those. In terms of drilling, I would say if you're don't just keep drilling if you're not getting a lot of the questions right. I would say if you're drilling and not getting any results, that would probably indicate that you can still improve your understanding of what you're doing. So don't just drill in the bad habits, but instead just like slow down and kind of think about what you're doing wrong and if there are any areas where you can improve that understanding of theory. I hope that helps. Let's see. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. Sorry. I noticed how your format. Did you do this for every logical reasoning question, or in the beginning when you were working them out, or did you just do these outlines for like particularly when you were at the point where you were just drilling PTs?
Yeah, I definitely didn't do this for like every question that I did. I don't know how long that would have taken, but even this, like, it took a long time. So I did start doing this after I started doing complete logical reasoning sections. So I would pick out every question that I flagged and every question that I got incorrect. I wouldn't do these for the questions that I did get correct because, I mean, if I got it correct, I probably don't need to be like deeply analyzing what I'm doing at that point. So these are only for the incorrect answers that I got. Yeah. So what I would do is I would, for example, take a PT on Monday, and then the next day I would go through this deep review using the Socratic review method. analyze all of the questions that I got wrong, write myself these little takeaways that you see in bold. And then the next time I would take another practice test, say on Thursday, right before the test, going into it, I would read the takeaways to myself again, just so that I reinforced them and didn't make the same mistake again on the next practice test that I was doing.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.